Welcome, everyone, to episode number 9 of Polar Opposites. We're almost in the double digits. I'm Spencer Byers alongside my co-host, Kajan Thiru Thanny Castle on vacation. Before I let you introduce yourself, before we get started, last week, a little more of a somber start with the passings of Alex Collins and Rodion Amirov. This week, something a little more positive. Of course, it has to be in the negative because when does anything positive happen just because positive thing needs to happen? But Kansas and Illinois head coaches. So Kansas being, of course, Bill Self with the Jayhawks, and Illinois coach of the Illini in Brad Underwood have decided they're going to play an exhibition game on October 29th for their preseason going into the NCAA season for both the Jayhawks and the Illini. They're going to televise it, and the proceeds from the game will go to the Maui wildfires over in Hawaii, because of course, Hawaii is on fire, as Canada was not too long ago over in the West Coast. Now, of course, the wildfires have, I'll say, spread, but are now over in the little island of Hawaii. And the Kansas Jayhawks and Illini have decided that they're going to televise their preseason game that was already going to happen, and that the proceeds will go to the wildfire help, which I got to be honest, Kajan, is quite impressive. And I hope more teams do it, because not only will the fans get to see some pretty high-level basketball, because, Illinois and Kansas are two really good programs under two rather good coaches in Bill Self and Brad Underwood, respectively. So not only will they see great basketball, it also goes to a great cause in trying to help out the relief across the pond, but in the nation of the U.S.
I mean, Spencer, you said it best. What a great, uh, what a great gesture here. For a greater cause, like from Kansas and Illinois, and mind you, why is it so significant between those two teams? It's because Bill Self left Illinois for Kansas like 20 years ago. Um, but the fact of the matter is, it's what happens during that game is insignificant. The fact that proceeds towards that game are going to the Maui Strong Fund, and what Hawaii has gone through with with fires ravaging the area, like it's just wonderful to see that there's some good in the world, and in a world that's been full of negativity, like left and right.
Yeah, and you mentioned that negativity. I do want to mention, as we talk about this, just quickly, that the wildfires have been running rampant on the island and has killed at least 111 people that they confirmed, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, that are still unaccounted for. So the death total could be a heck of a lot higher than anyone would want. So hopefully Kansas and Illinois can make a dent and hopefully help out the aid of the Hawaii Community Foundation Maui Strong Fund, as you mentioned, Kajan. And hopefully other teams take this and run. Hopefully other teams start televising their exhibition games so other programs can, help out with um, this particular foundation, because I think so it's definitely a worthy cause, of course. So hopefully they other teams follow suit in both the men's and women's, in fairness, because obviously the women's preseason is around the same time as their season starts, exactly when the men's does, just about. So
Nah, like it's just wonderful to see.
it definitely is great to see. But now we will move on to your regularly scheduled program. And starting off with, I mentioned the women's NCAA season. Well, right now, the WNBA season is in full effect. We're almost at the end. And something historic happened just days ago, if not just yesterday. A'ja Wilson, arguably the best player in the WNBA, I think made a really big claim to it last night, had 53 points, tying the record for most by any player in a game against Atlanta last night against the Dream, winning her Aces 29th game, might I add, 112-100.
And that's the other
53 points.
and that's the other thing. And that's the other thing. Like that game was relatively close until like the second half, so they needed every one of those points.
Yeah, they did, Cage. And again, not only that, it almost gets them to 30 wins on the season, which is just ridiculous. Just ridiculous.
Now, watching how she carved out that dream defense, um, which played like it was literally in a dream in La La Land, no pun intended. 16 of 23 from the field, 20 of 21 at the free throw line. That's to go to the free throw line and knock down 20 of 21 is just damn impressive. But there's just that one moment in that first quarter when Asia Wilson, not known, usually does her work on the inside and the mid range, but not necessarily known for shooting threes. Knocks down a corner three without any hesitation. When I saw that, I'm like, oh boy, it's gonna be one of those nights. And it turned out to be one of those. Nights. And when she was interviewed at the end of the game, just credited her teammates. And I'm like, we take this for granted. We take great players for granted, whether it's the WNBA and the NBA, because Asia Wilson is already a great all-time player as it is, and could be one of the greats ever if this keeps up. So we've talked about this before, Spencer, about how women's basketball is rising, not only at the WNBA level but also the grassroots level down here in Toronto and in Canada. And the fact that we're talking about like positive stuff every week about women's basketball, like, it's a great sign of things to come.
And a great signs for thing currently. And I know you and I keep talking about in the future, one day, maybe there'll be a Toronto team. One day, maybe the WNBA could have as many teams as the NBA. I think that might be a little strong, but eventually the WNBA could have, I believe we talked about it a couple weeks ago, they have 12 teams. They have 6 per division, which they do. They could get up as high as 10 per division, per conference at that point. So we'll see how big the WNBA can get, as the years go on. But currently, the product's as good as it's ever been, and it's going to continue to get better, as we talked about with funding getting pushed to the women's game, pushed, girls to want to play basketball and having aspirations that this can work, and hopefully at one point the WNBA will turn a profit, which will then mean the players are able to make a quote-unquote livable wage, which they don't really do right now. Not only because their season's rather small, it just is not feasible right now. I hope it one day is feasible, just as I hope it is for, I'll say men's, but women's lacrosse. I hope lacrosse one day can be a full-time job for guys, which right now it's not. I can tell you from personal experience, it's not. So I hope one day women's basketball, WNBA especially, and lacrosse, the NLL especially, I'll say, but even the summer guys, that they can get to a livable wage. Because I do want to bring light, and I won't spend too much time on lacrosse, because again, I'm also a fair weather fan at best. I just love it because I commentate it, and I've enjoyed my time commentary in the press box, where I deserve to be, by the way, Kajan, as we all can admit. But
for sure,
it's nice to see that, we're striving and the product's getting better, which would mean when the product gets better and more teams are added, there'll be more money going towards it, more sponsorship money, higher TV deals because there's more games, because there's more teams. So hopefully the WNBA continues to grow as the NLL continues to grow for lacrosse, of course. But I do want to mention Asia Wilson, as we said, tied the record for 53 with Liz Carmouche, I believe how you pronounce that, but I'll quickly run.
Liz Cambridge?
Cambridge, that's, pardon me. Yes, Liz Carmouche, I believe, actually is a UFC fighter. So that's where I did make that mistake. And she is a female fighter. She's really good, by the way. I believe Bellator champion currently. But anyway, she did it in 2018. And I also do want to mention, Kajan, that with that 29th win, they tie for the most wins in a WNBA season with the 2014 Phoenix Mercury, who went 29-5 in their 34-game season. So the Aces have a chance to surpass Phoenix as the winningest season ever in the WNBA,
That's
as they still
amazing.
have 7 more games to go. So I'd almost put the lock, I guess I can, the lock guarantee that within the next 7 games, they're not going to lose all 7. They're not going to go in a 7-game skid to end the year. They're going to break that record.
Minus a million odds
Yeah, exactly.
to get that win.
Yeah, exactly. There's no money in betting that one, Cage, and I would definitely agree with you there.
I mean, you could
So
get a set or two. It's a profit.
yeah, yeah. If you got a million to waste there, Cajun, I'm not sure I have it in my coffer. So unless you want to share, Cajun, maybe you can help out the cause.
Yeah, say less.
But
Uh,
want something to add?
no, if that was 6 months ago, yes.
You had $1 million 6 months ago? Are you hiding
No,
something from me, Cajun?
no, I meant me betting 6 months ago.
Oh, that's right. Yes, and actually, I should mention that Cajun has now gone away from betting. He has finally decided to stop making money and live the honest and earnest way,
Yep.
if you will.
Hey, sometimes you just outgrow things. This
Sometimes
is
you
one
just
of them.
outgrow things. And actually, yes, I do want to make sure I did get that right. It is Phoenix went 29-5 in a 34-game schedule back in 2014. And I believe, if my math is now correct, that would mean, of course, with the 40-game season the WNBA has right now, which I do believe is expanding soon, as close to next year, I want to say, or either it just expanded. My brain's trying to remember the articles I've skimmed through, and I believe it either said 48 game seasons coming or it just got to 40, and I'm maybe conflating the two. But regardless, again, the season getting bigger also again helps Cajun, because we kept talking about, the TV deals get bigger, the more teams they add creates more games, which again adds to TV deals, which is usually where the bulk of the men's sports make their money. It's not necessarily
And
just sponsorships for the teams. It's the TV deals that ESPN, that Fox, that NBC, that ABC, and then here in Canada, TSN, Sportsnet, CBC, etc. Shell
and
out.
I think there's one other thing like that with all those TV deals potentially coming in, an extended season, and more pay, more incentive for these women's ballers. It also doesn't have. They don't have to play overseas. They don't have to necessarily play overseas just to get by, just to make a living. And that's crucial because with all the taxing that it goes on a body when you play that much basketball without any sort of rest, careers get shortened. So with all this, with in light of all this, like the fact that like eventually they don't have to play overseas just to make a living, that's going to be huge too.
It will only add to the product on the floor, which everyone can get behind as we move
Absolutely.
closer and closer to the WNBA finals. Again, 7 games left for the supposed best team in the WNBA, at least best record in the WNBA, and going to be the records holder for most wins in a season, the Las Vegas Aces. But now on to the World Cup of Basketball. FIBA, almost there, Cajun. One more sleep, and then bright and early at 9:30 tomorrow. Again, Friday, or I guess tomorrow. I keep thinking today is Thursday, Cajun. Don't ask me why I keep thinking today's Thursday, but in my head, today's Thursday. 2 days from now. So a sleep and a half, if you will, at 9:30 sharp on Friday, the 25th of August. Canada will take on France, a Victor Wembanyama-less France, but a France team that will kick off the World Cup for the Canadian squad, who have gone 3-2 in their pre-tournament games, losing to the Americans and, upsettingly for me, to the DR, to the Dominican Republic. They did beat Spain, which I think is an improvement, but I'm not sure that Dominican loss sits well with me, even though, in fairness to Canada, they did sit their starters and did have a minute cap on everybody, gearing up for the World Cup to begin on Friday.
Hey man, they were the Dominican Republic were led by the great Carl Anthony Towns. It's not.
I don't want to hear that.
There's no.
I don't want to hear that right now. Cajun, how did I know you were gonna go there with that? How did I know the first words out of your mouth are gonna be about the man, the myth, the pylon, Carl Anthony Towns?
Oh man. Hey, in fairness, last week you were the one that brought him up. This was just there for the
Yeah, and
taking.
that was my mistake. Okay, Cajun, that was my mistake.
Hey man. Uh, Obviously there were no necessarily many implications there in terms of that game against the Dominican Republic on the steps of having an impressive win by that against Team Spain. Obviously you do want to win all your games. But hey, this is going to be interesting. They have stepped. I've liked how Canada has stepped it up when the stakes are highest against the teams that are at the top of their game, and for France is going to be a tough test coming off the bat, even without Wembanyama. You got Evan Fournier, Nicholas Batum, Raptor legend Nando De Colo. And obviously you can't forget about the Stifle Tower Rudy Gobert, who apparently shoots threes now, or maybe one a game, but this is going to be a test right off the bat, and it's going to say a lot about this Canadian team. They do you could arguably say that Canada does have one of the top 5 players of the FIBA World Cup in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And not only that, RJ Barrett has had some impressive moments in the lead up to the FIBA World Cup too. But this is going to have some big implications because whoever loses this, like, you got to win your next 2 games by far. And sure, Latvia and Lebanon aren't as strong, especially Latvia without Kristaps Porzingis in the picture there, but you got no margin for error if you lose. Like, whoever loses that game between Canada and France, they have no margin for error after that. So this one's going to have huge implications moving forward. And I think it's going to be the veterans that are going to be the X factor. Say someone like Kelly Olynyk and Dwight Powell, guys who have been there, done that. Now, in terms of like the NBA, not exactly household names, but they know what it's like to play on the FIBA World Cup stage, and especially under that style of play. And that's really helped everybody else catch up to speed in the lead ups heading into this FIBA World Cup. So those two are going to be big X factors in Canada going as far as it can go.
No, definitely Kelly Olynyk and the old head crew will definitely need to show these younger guys who have never really had the chance to play at an event like this, or have chosen not to, or to be honest, haven't been old enough. Like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, young player. RJ Barrett, young player. These are guys who haven't ever had really the chance to play at this level for their respective country, of course, here in Canada. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. Again, Friday, August 25th, 2 days from now, or just about a full day away, as we are recording this at almost 5 o'clock, almost supper time for me and all the, I'll say white people, Cajun, because I found some people eat really late, like 8 o'clock at night. I don't know why. I was always used to, like, by 6 o'clock, if I haven't eaten, I know I'm not eating tonight, I get a little confused myself, but maybe that's just me.
Guilty as charged.
Oh God, when do you eat? What time do you eat normally, Cajun? as a family, I'll say. But when did you normally eat as a kid?
I would say 7:38.
Jesus. Jizu.
I feel like that's early.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess I don't know what time your bedtime was, Cajun.
And do we really have bedtimes?
Not anymore, but when I was a kid, we did, so that's why we ate so early. Well, I think. And then we just never got out of that habit.
I
Because
mean,
I usually had my dessert by like 8, 9 o'clock. I had my ice cream or my ice cream sandwiches or cookies or whatever. Whatever I get my little mucky hands on, Cajun.
little monkey hands, bruh.
Little mucky hands, you know?
I went to sleep at around 10:30, 11 at the latest when I was a kid. The
Jeez.
good
Y'all
those
city folk. Y'all city folk. My God.
and those are and looking back right now, those were the good old days. Now I'd be lucky if I go to sleep at that time.
Yeah, it's either because you're too old and fall asleep too early or because you don't go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Or I don't go to bed ever.
Oh, yeah, exactly. There you go. You know what? Even better. Even better. But now on to a list that I guess should have been slept on, Cajun. ESPN released their predictions for the Eastern Conference, wins and losses, the records. Not only where they placed the teams, but their records. You and I are a little far away from that. We're not doing our lists until a little bit closer to the season. We know how injuries shake out because I think right now is a little too early. I think
Yeah.
I don't draft fantasy teams until like the week before the season starts because I want injuries to be sorted out. I want preseasons done. I want everybody good. You know, if somebody gets hurt in between when I draft my team and the season starts, then I just cry myself to sleep. But I usually try to wait as long as I can. Like my NFL team has not been drafted yet, will not be drafted until the absolute last moment because I don't want anyone getting injured before the season starts, and I get very upset. Very upset.
Are you joining that league? What I think you'd be joining?
I think I'm already in the league you might be thinking of for the NFL, but regardless of that, to the ESPN list for the Eastern Conference. They have them labeled as contenders, and then the bubble team, the play-in group, and then the bottom five. So the contenders or the 6 teams in the automatic 6 playoff spots go as follow. The Boston Celtics are number 1. The Milwaukee Bucks are number 2. The Cleveland Cavaliers are number 3. The Philadelphia 76ers are at 4. The Miami Heat are at 5. And in the last spot in the contenders list in the top 6 is the New York Knicks, which would imply a Cavaliers versus Knicks rematch of last year's. I can say last year's now because we're almost into this year's season, but of last year's first round where the Knicks upset Cleveland, beating the 4th seed as they were the 5th seed. So Cajun, just for the first 6, do you agree or disagree with that list?
Nah. What are the Sixers doing on that list?
And I'll be honest here, 46 win Sixer team without James Harden. I mean, I don't know. I do gotta agree. It seems a little high, especially with them believing that from the Knicks at 6, the Celtics at 1, there's going to be a 9-win difference at 55 wins for the number 1 place Celtics and 46 wins for both Miami and New York at 5 and 6. And then the next team at 7 has 41 wins. So they expect it to be a clear cut East from 6 up.
Yeah, it's not going to be.
You think
It's
it's a
not
lot
going to.
closer? I do have to agree with that. I do have to agree with that.
I think the 47 and 35 for the Sixers is crazy enough fair. But there's a difference between a 47-35 team that's a contender and there's a and a 47-35 team that's a pretender. Philadelphia is under the latter category.
For obvious
Especially
reasons, might I add.
for obvious reasons, and we'll get to that by with the absence of a fellow of a familiar southpaw bearded man. But yeah, like obviously you still got Tobias Harris, you got Tyrese Maxey, who I know you love, I love too. We'll take that next step. But after Embiid, Harris, and Tyrese, where's the secondary scoring coming from? And they lost a lot of guys over the off season. So I don't know. I disagree with. I think the Knicks are more a contender than I think the Knicks shouldn't be contenders, but I think they're more so contenders than the Sixers at this point. Um, Now a full season with the Knicks team as it is, I think having Josh Hart back in the fold is going to be huge. DiVincenzo, that was a big signing for them. That Knicks team is going to be better than people think. I don't think they're going to be sixth, but like I said before, there's a difference between a contender and a pretender. I don't think Knicks are in that contender category. But in terms of like, and I feel like, is it just me or is the win total too low for some of these teams?
Well, they have, again, the Celtics 55 wins being first, and then the Milwaukee 54 wins being second. Last year, Boston had 57 wins in second, and Milwaukee had 58 wins in first. So they're relatively close. The Cavs had 50 wins last year, 51 to be exact. The Sixers, though, will technically lose. If this is right and they win 47 games, they will have a net loss of 7 wins as they had 54 and were a 3 seed last year. So I don't necessarily disagree. Obviously, I think you and I know the top two are going to most likely be, especially with the way Philadelphia's fallen, Milwaukee and Boston. I think you and I can argue between the two. I still think Boston is the number 1 seed in the East. Well, will be the number 1 seed in the East. I think
I don't think that.
Milwaukee will
I don't
will
think
not
they.
beat them.
I don't think they'll be the number one. I don't think they'll be the number one seed come regular season time because they have to incorporate Porzingis into the mix and figure out what their point guard, how their point guard play is going to be. That being said, they are the better team between Boston and Milwaukee, but I think Milwaukee's going to take the regular season a little bit more serious than Boston.
I also think it depends on Chris Middleton's health. Again, he only played about 30 games last year. So if he's healthy for even 60 games, I think 82 is about 20 too many, but for his health, but I think 60 games of Chris Middleton will most likely propel Milwaukee over Boston. But I think if Middleton again only plays 30 games, I think they're gonna fall behind the Celtics in the East.
But
But I
yet
do
they
want to
finish.
mention, go ahead.
But yet they still finish first in the East in terms of the regular season. I'm just talking regular season.
Yeah.
They finished first in the East in terms of the regular season, even with Middleton playing
Yeah,
around 30 teams.
I just don't think they can duplicate it. I don't think it's a duplicatable feat. I don't. Personally, I don't think it's duplicatable.
It's not, but I don't think Chris Middleton is going to play 30 games now with a healthy offseason in the works.
You definitely wouldn't think so. I also want to mention that, maybe Brook Lopez will also be able to, continue his form with Giannis and Chris Middleton and even Drew Holiday. But I do want to mention here, Miami, they believe is going to jump only 2 wins. They get into the top 6 seeds because, again, they were technically the 8th seed last year. They were the 7th seed in the conference, then lost the play-in games and became the 8th seeded playoff team. But they were technically a 7th seed. So they jump up 2 spots to get to the 5th of the contenders, quote-unquote, list. Now let's jump over to the play-in teams. They think the Atlanta Hawks are that 41-41 team at 7. The Brooklyn Nets are 8th at 49-43. The Indiana Pacers are at 9, and Orlando the Magic are at 10, both at 38-44. 38 wins, 44 losses. So they again think the play-in is going to be filled with, instead of having 2 teams that are 500 or better, they're going to have 1 team that's 500, and the other 3 teams are below 500. Now, Brooklyn doesn't surprise me that they're going to be below 500. I don't even know if Brooklyn makes the playoffs. They might, with Mikal Bridges being talented and with all the trade pieces they got from the exodus of KD, Kyrie, and James Harden, respectively. But I think the Indiana Pacers are getting slept on right now. I talked about it last episode. I like the
agree.
Indiana Pacers. I love their roster. I even like the Orlando Magic's roster with Franz Wagner leading the way, now playing for Germany this year right now at the World Cup. Had a great game against Canada in game 1 where they beat the Canadians out of one of their 2 losses right out of the exhibition games, right? Like, I think, in fairness to, no offense to Atlanta, who I'll be honest, I don't think anyone really likes Atlanta's team. I think I will be included in that majority who does not like their roster. I love DeJounte Murray. I don't like their roster. and I'm not sure how it's going to look, especially without John Collins, who they traded earlier this offseason. I'm just
For a
not sure how
bag
it's
of
going to look.
peanuts.
Yeah,
For a bag
exactly.
of
For a half a bag of Lay's ketchup chips, Americans will get that reference. But if you can get across the border to Sarnia, Windsor, or Niagara, or if you're farther down the west coast and get over at one of the other borders, try to get some ketchup chips as an import. They're delicious. I think ketchup chips are magnifique. But anyway, Cajun, I'm not sure I like those play-in win totals. I'm not sure the teams are going to be very different. Like Brooklyn might make it in as a 10 seed for me, and you move up Indiana and Orlando. But I don't think 3 of the 4 teams are going to be below 500. I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I disagree.
I think Indiana's a lot better than that. I don't know about Atlanta or Brooklyn. I think Orlando's even better than that. So I'm not completely agreeing again with the win totals. But again, I think it's really early to say where teams are going to finish in the divisions. That's why I'm so surprised this was on our lineup. I kind of got confused. I'm like, why the hell are they predicting teams already?
Yeah, it doesn't make
But
sense. It doesn't make sense this early. I think Atlanta is going to be over 500. With another year of Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, for all of their flaws as a backcourt duo, they're still two great basketball players. Brooklyn, I can very well see fall out of the play-in picture. And
yeah, and
Indiana's
Brooklyn, go ahead.
and I agree with you. Indiana's being slept on because people forget Indiana had a below 500 record. I'm going to see what their record
I
was.
have it right in front of me, Occasion. They were the 11th. They were the 11th team in the East. They were 35 and 47.
But that comes with a caveat because Tyrese Halliburton was hurt for a little bit. And the record with Tyrese Halliburton in the lineup, I believe, was over 500.
And again, Cajun, you're missing 2 ads they made this offseason. And one of them's your guy. One of them's my guy.
Delano, oh wait, no, that was the Celtics.
Yeah, no, don't you dare say Delano Bannon to me. We're gonna have a fist fight here in a second. I will drive to Scarborough.
What if Banton leads them to the title, though? Won't you?
If Delano Banton's the guy leading the Celtics to the championship, Cajun, I will grovel at your feet.
Hey, it's a win-win for both of us.
Like
Your team wins it. Your team wins it all, and a Rexdale man led them to that point.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, led them. Yeah, led the bench maybe. But anyway, you're missing the 2 ads. Bruce Brown of the free agency variety, and then the trade they made for Obi Toppin.
Oh man, BB Jr.
Yeah, like your guy Bruce Brown, my guy Obi Toppin. 2 guys that I think are going to make a big impact. And again, to think that those 2 ads alone, Cajun, Bruce Brown and Obi Toppin, arguably the best 6th man in Bruce Brown and Obi Toppin, who I think has untapped potential in that nasty we talked about Thibodeau offense with in New York.
Revolting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, disgusting, revolting, this ridiculous offense that they run down there in New York that has optimized basically no one except for Jalen Brunson, buddy. Because RJ Barrett's also looked shaky in New York. Finally had a good playoff run and now has looked good at the World Cup. So hopefully he can propel that into a good, I want to say 4th season, but it's getting the years are mixing up in my head of where guys got drafted anymore. But anyway,
2019 was Barrett.
So we'll be going into his 4th season. Damn, I'm good, Agent. God damn, I'm good. Anyway.
God damn.
But anyway, like to think that Bruce Brown and Obi Toppin alone as ads, without Benedict Mathurin taking a step forward, without their 1st-round pick taking a step forward, that they're going to gain only 3 wins? That seems a little disingenuous to me. Like, I think they could gain 10 wins. They go to a 45-win team.
And behind like a great tactician and Rick Carlisle too.
Like a great coach. How can we forget? We mentioned him last week, Rick Carlisle. Like, great coach. So I think Indiana is going to be a hell of a lot better than what ESPN's giving them credit for. Hell of a lot better.
I think they might get out of the play-in picture, crazy enough as that sounds.
Well, if they win 45 games, Cajun, they're 1 game behind this predicted Heat and Knicks at 6 and 5 respectively. So I agree with you. I'd have to agree. And now on to the bottom 5, as they commented, or the 5 teams outside of the play-in. And I do have to be honest, I think they're underrating another team in this list. I want to see if you agree with me. 11 is the Chicago Bulls at 37 and 45. Why the Bulls have not blown up their team, I don't know. They landed in the 10th spot of the play-in, so they'll lose 3 wins from last year's total of 37 wins projected compared to their 40 of last season. The Raptors are 12th at 36-46, which is a 5-win swing downward. The Charlotte Hornets are 13. They finished 14th last year. Detroit finished 15th last year, only winning 17 games. They think they win 9 more, but that's only to 26-56, so they land second last in the East. And then dead last at 15, losing a grand total of 11 games more than they did last year. The 24-58 Washington Bullets. Wizards. Thought just for you old heads out there like you, Kajan, you'd like that Bullets reference. But
Yes, sir.
anyway, now I think the bottom 5 is probably right. I don't necessarily see any one of those teams making it into the play-in. Maybe Chicago, because they have the upside with Io DeSumo, DeMar DeRozan, and Zach LaVine, and Nikola Vucevic, who
Defrosted?
had an absolute horrible year last year, did Nikola Vucevic. But we'll see if the Bulls are able to make any ground up. I don't see it, and I think they blow it up not too far from now. I think they should. I think they already should have, but I think they do blow it up relatively soon, as that roster has not panned out the way they would have hoped under Coach Billy Donovan. But I think they're underrating the Pistons, Kajan. I think only 9 more wins from last year is a little disingenuous for that Piston team. They're getting back Cade Cunningham, who basically was hurt all year. Jaden Ivey will be healthy again. Jalen Duren will be healthy again. They get a full season of James Wiseman, who had a great run with them since the trade deadline when they got him from Golden State. I think that team, and they also drafted, I believe it was 4th overall. They got Answer Thompson. I think Thompson's going to be great for him as a shooter. I think that Piston team could shake some heads. I think with all the young guys getting better every year, you'd think, and continuing to add talent with the top 5 draft picks, eventually they're going to find the right mix and they're going to win some more games. No, I don't think they're a play-in team. I think that's a little too far from now. But I think they could easily win 30 games and be closer to the play-in. Maybe not in it, but closer to it. I think 26 is well too low for a team that is missing arguably their best player in Cade Cunningham basically all last year.
And Ivy's going to be better than he was last season, which he was decent last season too. There's another year of James Wiseman being seasoned in the Piston system.
They got a full off season finally for the first time.
Absolutely. Obviously, Oscar Thompson, Jalen Duren too. You got Isaiah Stewart. You got some depth pieces there, and then Bojan Bogdanovic still in the mix. And under all that, you got a no-nonsense coach and a motivator who's perfect for a roster like this in Monty Williams.
Exactly.
But I'm gonna give you one more team that I think is underrated too because of the talent that they have right now. And I think pains me to say this name because of what he did last offseason, but the Hornets played their best when LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges were in the lineup together. That Hornets team has some talent.
I think Ball's healthiness. I think LaMelo Ball being healthy right now is the biggest question.
It is true. That is true. That is true. That is also a big factor when it comes to these projections. But they do have upside when if Ball's healthy. I think that record is too low given the talent that they have.
Yeah, and they got draft picks. Brandon Miller, obviously, I believe he was number 2 overall, if I'm not mistaken. And Scoot Henderson went 3 to the Trailblazers.
Yeah.
You've got James Nagy, who also got drafted last year, or I guess just the draft that just went. They still have a young guy like JT Thor, who's only 20 years young. Leaky Black, who was on that miracle run North Carolina team 2 years ago, who went to the final game. He is 24, so he's probably the oldest guy, but still he has that experience of going to a national championship. He'll bring some experience, even though he's never played in the NBA before, so he's kind of a finished product. And you mentioned LaMelo Ball. I want to mention another name, James Bouknight. Bouknight had a great year last year at UConn. He was a surprise for a lot of people coming out of UConn for that Hornets team. So if they can find, again, the right mix, that's the problem with these young teams, the right mix, you might be able to win more games than people think. And again, I don't think you and I are trying to say that the Hornets are going to make the play-in. The play-in is going to be a dogfight in the East. I think from basically 4 down. I think the top 4 teams in the East are going to be pretty set with Boston, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and then whoever comes out of, if it's Philly or if it's Miami or if it's New York. I think one of those teams will move themselves into that 4 spot and kind of sit themselves there. And it'll be a top 4. And then I think 5 down is going to be a dogfight.
Yep.
Probably 12. And then once you get to 12, you're going to have, the Washington Wizards, who are going to be absolute garbage. You might have maybe Brooklyn might fall that far if they can't find the right mix, or maybe the Pistons get hurt again, or maybe the Bulls do blow it up after 30 or 40 games. Like, maybe the Raptors finally move, Siakam and or OG, and they kind of fall apart at the end. Like, a lot of stuff can still happen. Where does Siakam go or OG go from the Raptors? Do the Bulls blow it up because they're not going to be a playoff team, most likely with DeRozan and Levine? What do the Wizards do with their absolute awful looking roster? Do the Nets try to make a move? Does Atlanta make another move after trading John Collins? Lillard is still out there. Harden most likely, I'd almost guarantee, is going to move from Philly within the next couple weeks, if not a month. Like, a lot of stuff. And maybe the Heat add. Maybe that's the Heat team goes to 4 because they add Lillard or add Harden somehow. Because, again, they've been the team that's always been top player getting on the market, Kajan. That's where they're going, Miami. They're going to Miami. Every time. They're always one of the first 3 names out of if a top player is listed. So maybe they finally make that swing and get Lillard. So a lot of stuff can still move, but that is the list from top to bottom. It goes Celtics, Bucks, Cavs, Sixers, Heat, Knicks, top 6. Play in as Hawks, Nets, Pacers, Magic, and the bottom 5 being the Bulls, the Raptors, the Hornets, the Pistons, and of course the Washington Wizards. So,
Absolutely.
Well, I guess we'll see what the East will look like. You and I will make our predictions in probably almost over a month's time, but in a while's time when, the season is drawing nearer. But as you and I said, some underrated teams, Detroit Pistons, Charlotte Hornets, and I think especially, big circle on the calendar, the Indiana Pacers. They're a very underrated team in this list, and they could easily make a jump into the top 6 of the Eastern Conference.
The only thing that'll hold back the Pacers are injuries. That's the only thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because again, they're a really good-looking team, and again, they had a top 10 pick this year too. They got Jace Walker out of Houston, who's a really good player, and will make an impact on that team. How big we don't know, but he'll make an impact. So they're only getting better with adding Bruce Benoit-Toppin, as we mentioned earlier. But now on to something we've been talking about for. I even mentioned it in just previous, just moments ago. It seems to continue to swirl, Cage, and James Harden. After the NBA investigation, the investigation still could be going on, to be honest. But officially, James Harden has been fined $100,000 by the NBA for his public trade demands, and indicating that he will not play for the Sixers unless he is traded. Oh, and it has concluded. So I am reading officially that it has been concluded, and they have fined him the $100,000. That is the end of the investigation. So I guess it just continues to get more murky, Kajan.
And also the other thing is, like, the Players Association is filing a grievance saying he didn't violate any rules. They intend to
continue turning.
And this was from yesterday night.
Yes, the fine had just been handed out. I'd say mere hours ago, but about a day ago, when they officially announced that Harden would be getting a $100,000 fine, which, we talk about the fines in every sport, that they're not big enough, they need to be bigger because of how much money the athletes make. I don't think I'm not saying $100,000 is a lot to a guy who gets paid $30 million. I'm not trying to say that, but still, it's a big enough chunk of change where I'm pretty sure James Harden's going to kind of feel it in the checkbook this next couple weeks.
I mean, will he though?
I mean, maybe. Maybe he'll go to a restaurant and try to bring out his cash and go, what paid my fine? Give me a minute.
I mean, $100,000 for him is chump change.
I mean,
like,
That is
And
fair.
for us, it'd be somewhat of a fortune at this point, given that we live in Toronto. Um, but for him, it'd be chump change, and I'm like, bruh. But
But go ahead.
yeah, it's just and it was in light of the comments that he made calling Daryl Morey a liar and that he'll never play for the organization again.
An organization that employs him again. Not only will he not play for the
Was-
Sixers, he won't play for any organization that employs him again.
And I don't think this is just this is just not a Sixers problem at this point. Now, at in light of those comments, this was never really a problem with the Sixers. It's personal with Morey.
Yeah.
So say the Sixers fire Morey, and I don't think Harden has a problem with the Sixers no more, and will report to training camp.
And I wonder how much the fine will be, Cajun, if he doesn't show up. Because if they've already fined him 100,000 for saying, for making that public, that the decree that he'll never play for the Sixers again or an organization that employs Morey again specifically, that
Mm-hmm.
if he does sit out, say training camp, or he does sit out, I'll say preseason games, or the season's getting closer and closer and the Sixers are having trouble making James show up, will the NBA step in and fine Harden A, more money, or B, maybe suspend him, or what they decide to do? Because right now it kind of feels like, this is an NBA problem. This has been an NBA problem for years now, Cage, and it's just finally coming to a head where the athletes have way too much power. And I'm not trying to say that as a guy who wants the owners to have all the power. I don't. I campaign for players every chance I get. I think the owners are greedy as anybody in all of sport, and they're going to be because they have all the money and all the power because they have all the money. They're the one paying these guys. Because again,
Yeah.
think about it. If James Harden's making $30 million, how much is the guy that owns the Sixers making to pay him $30 million to play basketball? Right? Like, just put that in your head. Think about it for a second. But anyway, you know, they do have too much power in saying that, they can just basically say, "Oh, I'm not playing for you. I don't care about my contract. I don't care. I'm not playing." Like James Harden at the end with the Houston Rockets. He played for Houston, but the memes were numerous for how overweight he was, his shape that he looked, how much he looked like he didn't care. Like athletes are basically mailing it into the NBA because they can. They don't need to play. They can mail it in and get away with it. Maybe that's where the NBA can finally take their stand. And I've standed so much I just can't stand no more. And finally, put it in that the players will not have as much power as they do now or used to have, because it is getting ridiculous and it's continuing to, you know, cause problems, not just for the Sixers, but for all NBA teams trying to get guys to, I'll say, commit to teams, but even play for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting ridiculous. And Harden is right now just the most recent example of athletes having just a little bit too much power in saying where they're going to play, when they're going to play, and how much they're going to play. It's getting a little ridiculous, Cage. Well, I guess it's been getting a little ridiculous. It's just going over that line of, we can stand it, we can stand it. I think it's getting to that point where we can no longer ignore the issue.
And I think that's a problem when you give a certain like either players or owners too much power, because we've seen it in the MLB with the owners and Rob Manfred. I know unrelated to basketball, but we've seen how that's unfolded in the opposite with the MLB. With the NBA, there's yeah, players gotta figure out gotta look out for themselves, because at the end of the day, a lot of these guys are disposable in the NBA. But it's gone too far to the point where it's like, okay, this is too much. It's gone to the point where when a certain side has too much power, it doesn't end well. And with the James Harden situation, we're seeing exactly that.
Yeah, it just continues to snowball, and again, I'm trying to implore to everyone, and I know Cajun agrees with this, that James is not the only one. James Harden is not the only guy that's done this. He will not be the last guy to do this unless the NBA stops it now. Because other athletes in every sport, but specifically basketball in the last 5 to 10 years, this happens a lot. Like, how much money do you want to bet that Damian Lillard will basically never play again for Portland? I'd almost be willing to bet $100 right now that Damian Lillard will most likely never play another game for the Portland Trailblazers. And if he does, they will be pretty lackluster minutes, if I had to be honest.
Mhm.
Because he's wanting to get traded. How do you get traded faster? You play like garbage, because then your value goes down, which then means the team that's trading for you has to offer less capital, and the team you're on can ask for less, because if the player's playing bad, then you can't ask for a high premium,
Yeah.
even for what they've done previously. So that's just the thing, and it will continue to snowball until the NBA says, okay, that's enough. We're done with this player power garbage where you guys can basically play whenever you want and sit out as many games as you want. Like, Kajan, you know how bad the quote unquote load management got in the NBA? They had to place a rule where you could only sit out home games. That's how bad it
Yeah.
got. That people were buying tickets to see Kawhi Leonard play in Milwaukee, play in Boston, play in LA, and he'd sit out away games and just say, I don't want to play. My foot hurts, my leg hurts, whatever, and not play. And I know I'm picking on Kawhi there because he's kind of the poster boy, for, if you will, for the load management. But other athletes have done it, and other basketball players especially have done it. Joel Embiid, another good example, who honestly needs it because of how injury prone he is. But regardless, in spite of the injury proneness, as a fan, why would I want to go to a game when the best players that are on the team are not going to play? What's the incentive? Like, Cajun, you know how mad I would be if I went to Boston again? I'm a Celtics fan. I am not a Raptors fan. Don't pretend to be one. If I went to Boston to go see the Celtics play at TD Garden, and I showed
And
up, and 2 hours before the game, I heard that Tatum and Jaylen Brown are both sitting for load management, you know how mad I would be that I spent all this money to go see them play in Boston at the Garden, and they both sit out because of load management? Like, what a slap in the face.
it
I'd still
really
get to see my
is.
favorite player, Time Lord. I would still get to see my boy Robert Williams.
Would
But
you really, with how injury prone he is sometimes, would you
injury prone
really?
he is, yes, exactly. But he doesn't sit out, does he? I've never really heard of
No,
load
it does.
management for him. Normally, he gets sit out because he's hurt. His ankle's tweaked, or his foot's hurting, or his knees are hurting, or he's got a shoulder problem. Like, in fairness to Robert Williams, he doesn't get to load management because he's always hurt.
Mm-hmm.
What? What a slap in the face. Like, Cajun, we're in Toronto. You want to go see the Raptors play? You go see Raptors play. Pascal Siakam's load management. OG sitting out tonight. Like, what a slap in the face. Like, what a
It
slap in the
is.
face of the fan. Why am I paying my hard-earned money to go see you play if you're gonna sit out games when I'm trying to see you play?
Yeah.
Like, what an absolute joke. So hopefully the NBA will eventually stop it. I'm not saying they're going to stop it with Harden. I honestly don't think they're going to. But I'm hoping someday soon they finally put their foot down and say enough is enough. Enough is enough. We're not letting this happen anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that day ears closer with this fine. I'm hoping that day is a little bit closer today than it was just yesterday, or closer from yesterday as it was the day before, is my
Oh,
hope.
for sure. For sure.
Because again, as you and I are fans, there's nothing worse than wanting to go see your favorite team play and your quote unquote favorite player not being on the floor or the ice or the field. Nothing worse. Because then what's the enjoyment? It's basically gone.
And for like a reason aside from injury.
Yeah, or family related. If it's something
Yeah.
health or marriage or whatever. Or if they go on, I'll say mat leave. They get the registered leave for if a baby is coming. Unless
Yeah.
it's I'll say quote unquote valid reason just to sit out because, I'm tired or I'm sore. No offense, you're a professional athlete. Like, at the end of the day, you know, you're gonna get tired, you're gonna get sore, but the fans are paying to watch you play.
And honestly, like maybe these new rules, like playing in 60 games max, like minimum to for you to be eligible for All NBA or for like awards, maybe that's a step in the right direction, but a lot more has got to be done.
Exactly. There's still a lot of big stones that are going to have to be rolled to get I think the players to finally kind of buck up and play at I'll say a more consistent level. More consistent level. But talking about consistency, Steph Curry has recently come out and said that he believes he's the greatest point guard ever.
Mm-hmm.
And as I couldn't seem to find the article, Cajun, I finally take a look and finally find the gander. I finally found it. Curry said, and it looks like in an interview, he said he is the greatest point guard ever. And Cage, I'm not going to say I think he's wrong, but there's a lot of really good point guards that have played in the NBA. A lot of really good ones, including him, might I add. But normally guys try to wait out saying they're the best until they're retired. Curry didn't. Curry's still an active athlete, is supposedly going to play at least a few more seasons, you'd expect. And now I think he's going to have a target on his back as well. Of course, he already does. MVP, multi-time champion, finals MVP. He's done it all in the NBA. But I think saying you're the greatest point guard ever is going to put a little bit more of a target on your back. Especially, with, I'm not going to say that the fans, but with the athletes especially. But Cage, I'll ask you the question. Do you agree with Stephen Curry? Do you agree that Mr. Del Curry's son is the best player, or the best point guard, to ever play in the NBA?
All right, so since I like Govey names, Wardell, Stephen Curry Jr.,
JR.
JR. No reference to JR Smith, my favorite player of all time. If you want to know why, don't. It's a stupid reason.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Anyway, continue.
He's not the greatest point guard ever, but I love the confidence, and the fact that this is a debate speaks to how great of a point guard he is. By the end of his career, maybe you have that conversation about him being the greatest point guard ever. And he does have the accolades to sort of argue with it. He's got 4 rings, the greatest shooter of all time. He's finally that Finals MVP that has eluded him for so long. He finally got that 2 seasons ago.
He also has a unanimous MVP, doesn't he, Cajun? Sorry to interrupt you.
He does. And it would have been Shaq would have been on that list had some idiotic reporter not put Allen Iverson on that list as first, but I digress. But I don't think he's the greatest point guard ever yet. I think that honor goes to Magic Johnson. Literally, like, as I was skimming through articles, Michael Jordan literally texted Stephen A. Smith, according to Stephen A. Smith, saying that Magic is the best point guard ever. And I do agree.
That is his era, though. So I no offense to Michael Jordan, arguably the best player ever. Period. He did play with Magic during the Dream Team. He did play against Magic. Before that. So I'm not really sure he gets a chance to play because he never played against Steph Curry. He never saw. He never was on the floor with that greatness. He was on the floor with a different type of greatness. But continue.
Like, personally, I still think Magic's better than Curry. But that might not be for long. I don't think what he said was far-fetched. I don't think he said what he said was far-fetched at all. Because if he's not number one, he there's a lot of great point guards in this league, but Curry's one of the greatest. You could have an argument that he could be second on that list. So it's not a far-fetched. I love the confidence, and it's not as far-fetched as you think it is. And in terms of like point guards, because I've heard this, like, is Steph Curry really a point guard with the Warrior style of play that he does, and Magic's a more natural point guard. Well, they also play two different roles. Magic was a more natural point guard, but he was also 6'8", playing alongside like I know he wasn't exactly in his prime, but he was still a heck of a basketball player in Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and James Worthy. Steph Curry, I know he played with KD for a bit, but like the fact that like it's just I I have no problems with him saying that. I have no problems with him saying that because the fact that people are debating about it in terms of like their roles, in terms of like the accolades, and the fact that and the fact that it's not as far fetched as people think it is, like with all the accolades Curry has so far, and he's still got time to like overtake Magic. Like, what if he gets that fifth ring? Then this argument becomes a lot closer. It might be splitting hairs at that point. So right now, I think Magic's better, but the margin between those two players is not as big as people think it is. And I think what this sort of reminds me of was when LeBron said like, I think you remember this when he came back from down 3-1. It's like that right there made me the greatest player of all time, which I thought that was far fetched at that time. At that time, saying that. Now, if he said that right now, I'm like, that's not as far fetched because like he's got more accolades right now. But at the time, like what LeBron said was like, yeah, coming back from 3-1 all time, like that's never happened. But it was still too early to say that. Now that Curry's like somewhat close in terms of rings, and the fact that he's already become the greatest shooter of all time, and that mind you, he made other players emulate. He made the future generation of NBA players emulate him. He really changed. He pretty much changed the game, and wasn't blessed with athletic talents as say LeBron, Kobe, MJ. He wasn't blessed with those talents. So in due time, he could pass Magic. I don't think this is as far fetched. I don't agree with it yet, but I don't have a problem with what he said.
To explain resumes, Magic Johnson, a listed 6'9" point guard. Steph Curry, a listed 6'2" point guard. At this point in time, Steph Curry has 9 All-Star game appearances. Magic Johnson has 12. Magic Johnson has 10 All-NBA appearances. Steph Curry has 9. 2 MVPs for Steph Curry, 3 MVPs for Magic Johnson. 3 Finals MVPs for Magic Johnson, only 1 for Steph Curry, but he does have the 4 championship rings.
So it's like Magic does have the edge. Magic does have the edge to me, but Curry's close.
And I do also want to say this, in fairness to Magic Johnson, he did lose 4 seasons. Well, I'll say 4, but I'll explain. He lost 4 seasons and then played 32 games of his last season in 95-96 because of his diagnosis with HIV. So he retired basically at 31. He only played 11 years in the NBA. And 9 of those 11, or actually I'll say 12, he played 12 years, and 9 of those 12 years, he averaged 10 or more assists. So excluding his age 36 season where he only played 32 games, did not play point guard, and was still a good player, but was not as good as he was obviously when he was, 5 years younger and in his prime. Right? So I think that also needs to be taken into account, that him losing so much time to being diagnosed with HIV also does take away from, I'll say, his legacy, but takes away from what he could have done. right?
What he could have been even more.
What he could have accomplished, what he could have done, what accolades he would have if he was able to play a healthier career, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll never know what Magic could have been without the diagnosis. We'll never know. We will never know.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, Kajan, you mentioned it nailed it right on the head for me. And I guess we can say the same thing with Steph Curry and the injuries. The injuries early in his career also delayed his ascension to the best player arguably in the NBA. But I do want to mention this because I think it's very important. I feel like people always seem to skim over it when we talk about who's the greatest player or best this, best that in any sport. What these two guys do at the point guard position, they couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
They could not be more different. Like Magic Johnson, as I said, for 9 consecutive seasons from age 23 to age 31, averaged 10 or more assists per game. His lowest total was at 23. His 4th season in the NBA, he averaged 10.5 assists per game. I believe he led the league with 10.5 assists per game. At age 31, he averaged 12.5 assists per game. Again, 10.5 was his lowest. 13.1 the next season at age 24 was his highest assists per game. So 13 assists per game was his highest career average at point guard. Steph Curry, on the other hand, looking at his total career, his highest was 8.5 assists, which is really good. But that was when he was 25 and only averaged 24 points a game. His lowest assist total would have been his age 30 season back in 2018-19, where he averaged 5.2 assists per game. And then I'll just mention this again, and I know I'm mentioning a lot of numbers, so try to stick with me. Magic Johnson's highest career points per game was 23.9 when he was 27 in 1986-87. So basically 24 points per game. Steph Curry, 32 a night. He only did that for 5 games, so most over a real season, but back in 2015-16, he averaged 30 a game, which led the league. Shooting 45% from 3. Yes, I did say that right. 45% from 3.
He averaged 32 points per game in 2020-2021.
That was only for 5 games. Or wait, no.
No,
I
63.
did mislabel that. I did mislabel that. That was the year before he only played 5 games, so I was right. It was 32 games. 32 a game back just a few seasons ago was his highest total. And that, from a 3-point percentage, was a 42% from 3. So
Which was
all of those
ridiculous.
numbers coming at you, all of that is just to say these two guys do not play the same game. They should not really be compared. Yes, you can compare resumes, but they're not the same player. They're different guys. So I hate these types of conversations. And I know, we will probably do them as this series goes on because A, they're easy talking points and there are arguments you can make for either side. But I hate them because it takes away the individuality of every athlete. Because these guys are not the same athlete. They're not the same player. They never were. They never were meant to be. Steph
And they played in
Curry
different
is
and they played
this,
in different eras too.
adding again another layer to the whole point of back in the 80s, they didn't shoot threes. The greatest 3-point shooter then was Larry Bird. He never shot more than I think 5 a game, and I'll quickly check to actually see his greatest 3-pointing feet attempts per game. A different game. And not only that, Kajan, we talk about different eras and different games. And again, the listed difference in height is 7 inches in favor of Magic Johnson. Again, listed 6'9" compared to 6'2" for Steph Curry. Another wrinkle to add into it, no offense to Magic Johnson, when he was a player, point guards wanted to be Magic, but you had to be 6'9" to be Magic. You got to be tall and long and do all these extra things to be Magic. Kids now all want to be Steph Curry. Even when the big guys want to be Steph Curry. Karl Anthony Towns wants to be Steph Curry. As you mentioned earlier. Like, that's where the game is gone. Everybody's shooting threes. Everyone wants their toes behind the line. Nobody wants to take that long two. Nobody. It is seen as the quote-unquote most inefficient shot in all of basketball, no matter what level you're playing at.
Gone are the days where gone are the days where guys like Chris Webber and I think Kevin Garnett's a big one that thrived off of the long too. Gone are those guys.
And in fairness, so did Kobe.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant was a great, long two-shooter. That is gone. Like Kobe now would be forced to shoot behind the three-point line. Forced to. Like it or not. And now here, for a fact, Kajan, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson came into the NBA the same year after the NCAA tournament. The most threes Larry Bird ever took in a season per game average was 3.3 threes a game. And that was in his second last season as a Boston Celtic. Steph Curry, lowest three-pointers attempt in a season was 4.6 in his second year in the NBA, when it still was not okay to shoot threes. But since 2012-2013, which was his fourth season in the NBA, he has shot no less than 7.7 threes per game, his highest being the year when he scored averaged 32 a game at 12.7 threes a game.
That's ridiculous.
That would be a team's total threes back in the 80s.
And I
would be a total.
And I would argue during that year too. You said Larry Bird's was like 4.6?
3.3.
3.3.
That's a Curry's per game.
Curry's average makes during that season is more than Larry Bird's most attempts. That's wild to think about.
Yeah. Like Larry Bird averaged 1 made 3 a game. He averaged 0.7 makes from 3 a game. One of the best three-point shooters to ever play the game of basketball averaged 0.7 threes made per game. Think about it. Like that. We aren't even comparing the same type of game that they play now to then. They're not comparable. They're not the same thing. They're not even close. So I do not like these arguments. I will sit and bang the table as long as I live to that argument, because I think it's stupid and will always think it's stupid. Even if I am a hypocrite and do it myself, which we are doing right now, I'm okay with that, because it is ridiculous to compare Magic Johnson to Steph Curry in almost any way except for resume of what they've done in the NBA, like the 10 All-NBA teams for Magic compared to 9 for Steph Curry, or the 3 Finals MVPs for Magic compared to the 1 for Steph Curry. I'm okay with that. Those are resumes. You can compare resumes to anybody.
And honestly, and it's only like, and I don't like comparing players, and I don't like comparing players for the most part, especially when they're from different eras. Like, only reason why it's like sort of doable in this case is because of their resumes.
And because Curry said it himself. When the athlete says it himself, it's a little different than when some guy on television says it, whoever they may be, former athlete or not.
But those two could not put, and that's fair. But those guys could not have played any more different than they are. Now, if nobody made this argument, say you compare somebody to Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, they both played similar styles, then that's a little bit more doable. But for Magic and Steph, how can you you can't really make a comparison between those two. Maybe you can put them in the portal and see what happens, but that's virtual reality, folks. That's fantasy. What I will appreciate is that those are 2 great point guards. Those are 2 great point guards. You could argue they could be consensus 1 and 2.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you could kind of see it. That's the only thing that people can sort of agree on to that degree, unless Mad Max just mentions Bob Cousy out of nowhere, which would not surprise me. But Magic and Steph are consensus 1 and 2.
And I do want to mention, Cage, sorry to interrupt you, is NBC's article that I looked at to prove to me that Steph Curry said these things. It said that the three guys in the conversation for best point guard ever are Magic and Curry, and Oscar Robertson is the third wheel to those 2.
And honestly, I agree with that.
And then there was the second tier of elite guards, which this guy lists, and he says so I will say this guy lists as Jerry West, John Stockton, Isaiah Thomas, obviously Detroit Pistons Isaiah Thomas, and Steve Nash with Chris Paul as that second tier of point guard.
Yeah, I see
And
that.
I'm not necessarily saying he's wrong or right on either, because again, I don't like comparing Jerry West to Steve Nash. Jesus, come on now. They played like 40 years apart. That's ridiculous. There's no point even trying. There's no point even
But
trying.
but in terms of putting them in tiers of point guards, that's a different story.
Exactly. Because you're comparing resumes, you're comparing things they have done, comparing speaking to the actual players on the floor. Like when you're building a team around Magic Johnson compared to Steph Curry, you're not trying to build teams that are comparable. You're not. They're different teams with different criteria that have different goals because of just the way you'd build the team.
Mm-hmm.
So I really very much dislike the media that's not gonna like the national media, the vast majority of media that are gonna take this and send it, to 1,000,000% overused and have this argument circulating until the season starts about who's better, this or that, resumes and all that garbage. Because it gets to the point where it's just nauseating. Because again, you're comparing a guy who's 6'9", who got the touch of height compared to a guy who everyone feels like they can compare to. And as I was mentioning with Steph Curry, everyone emulates now. Everyone wants to be Steph Curry. Everyone wants to shoot threes. You cannot watch a AAU game or a high school game or a college game where there's not a ridiculous amount of threes. For good or worse, for better or for worse. In my opinion, at like the really youth level, for worse. But it's the way the game's gone now. Every kid wants to shoot threes. All of them. Every last one of them. So that's the way the game's going. And it will continue to go that way, Cage. It's only going to get worse from here, I'll say. But depending on side of the fence you're on, it'll only get worse from here. With the way basketball as a whole is going.
Yeah.
But to end us off, as we've gone a little long again this week, but again, we've had quite a few topics this week in the rumor mill. To end her off, the New York Knicks, who are, again, projected to be 6th in the Eastern Conference by ESPN, have cited the Toronto Raptors and are suing them and a former employee, saying that this former employee gave the Toronto Raptors proprietary information, and they're suing the Raptors for illegally procured and then disclosed proprietary information. So they're suing the Raptors for they're suing the Raptors for having information that they should not have, having quote unquote thousands of confidential files, including play frequency reports, a prep book for the 2022-23 season, video scouting files, opposition research, and more after the team began recruiting him to join their organization in summer 2023. That was the Raptors trying to recruit this unnamed member of the former Knicks brass. And actually, I do have his name. I am not going to pronounce it because it is a name that is definitely from the continent of Africa. And I have not the first idea how I'd even attempt it. Have you read it? And can you want to guess it, Kajan? Go right ahead.
Ikechukwu Azotam.
Close
That
enough.
might not be the right pronunciation, but it's spelled Ikechukwu, and then the last name is Azotam, and he worked from the Knicks from 2020 to 2023.
And as we've stated with this summer of 2023, when the Raptors were attempting to get him onto the team, he released all these alleged files to the Raptors. And I'm not saying this is a closed and shut case because we still have to wait, obviously, for the court proceedings to happen down in New York. Because again, they're the ones citing the Raptors with the suit. We'll see if it's true, and if it is true, I think this will continue the fall of Masai Ujiri. And I'm not trying to intimate or even guess the Raptors are guilty. I'm not. I truly believe in innocent until proven guilty, and we'll see if the Raptors are proven guilty in a court of law. But Masai Ujiri's reputation is already starting to fall with the Raptors not doing so well and seemingly holding on to Siakam and OG for literally no reason, just about, because they're not going to be competitive next year from anyone's guess, unless they shock everybody with new head coach Darko Rajakovic.
Mm.
You know, so if this report comes to be true, it's just going to add to the Raptors' falling reputation in the NBA. I think.
Nah, you're right. It would. It would. But do I see it being just smoke, just all smoke right now? For now, yes, because this is a pretty big accusation to make. And it's very difficult proving stuff like this. And um and I was I was skimming through some articles, like there have been anonymous team employees who were surveyed about this, like with the Knicks alleging the Raptors gaining a competitive advantage at 9 separate points in their complaint. They all of them found this to be a bit of a stretch. And one team employee said, and this is from any sort of team, like in the most advantageous possible case, a Zotum's alleged activity could be used to speed up the employee's personal work. But unless the employee transitioned during the playoffs from one team to the opponent, there is no real benefit. Sharing synergy videos is the equivalent to liking something on Twitter. Now, Synergy is like a software that I'm guessing like teams use, but it's available to every team in the league and with other people who pay for access to the software. And Synergy is a commonly used tool throughout the NBA. So if that's what the Knicks are going along with, I think it's just like smoke. But if this is true, you would have to think that's the end of the line for Ujiri and Webster. Because how can you come back from that? You can't. But I'm also feeling a whole bunch of different reactions. Like, I just find it a bit hilarious. It's like, is this James Dolan's way of getting back at Masai Ujiri for fleecing him in that Bargnani deal, or for being scared of trading for Lowry back in 2013-14? Like, hey, like there could be pettiness behind this. There could be a whole bunch of things behind this. Like, it's an ongoing situation, and I'm interested to see how this unfolds, especially since these are two teams in the Atlantic Division too. So there's greater implication in terms of like those two teams, given that they're in the same division.
Yeah, and I do want to mention this, Kajan. I want you to kind of go off this because this is quite a damning quote in the lawsuit. So, and I quote, so this was the article, and then I'll give you the quotes. So the Knicks are also alleged that members of the Raptors, quote unquote, so quote, directed Azumtem to misuse his access to the Knicks subscription to Synergy Sports to create then transfer to the Raptors defendants over 3,000 files consisting of film information and data. The alleged number is 3,358 video files. And the stolen files were accessed over 2,000 times by the Raptors. That's all quote. Like, that seems rather damning about the Raptors, that it was accessed over 2,000 times.
It is damning. It is damning, but it just but over 2,000 times, like how stupid can an organization be in doing that though? It just makes you wonder, like, unless there's lax rules behind it, like, or it's just not it just hasn't gone unchecked. Like, that's the part I find hard to believe. Like, going over it 2,000 times, you would think it'd be red flagged at some sort of point. And what's more telling is that out of the unnamed defendants in that lawsuit from the Raptors, only head coach Darko Rajagovic was named in that, but not Masai. And I found that sort of interesting.
It definitely is interesting because if it is Darko, how quickly could he be fired? We've seen this in the past where coaches get themselves in hot water and get basically canned almost immediately. And
Hmm.
if that is the case, Cajun, who are the Raptors' backup? Like, and I don't mean that as in he is guilty, but imagine he is. Does that mean they have to scramble for Jordi Fernandez, current Canadian national team head coach? Does that mean they go after, somebody else maybe from Europe as they were looking at, throughout their process? They took forever to name their guy in Darko Rajakovic.
Hmm.
And if this comes out as that he and the Raptors are guilty and he does end up losing his job over it, I mean, this again, it could only get worse, you'd think, from here, unless the Raptors are proven innocent, which then would basically make the Knicks look like a horrible organization, which I feel like most people under James Dolan, the owner of the New York Knicks, I don't think they can get much worse than where they are now, which is where everyone thinks fun of them.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see, Cajun, if they're able to get away with this, but the Scrabble board, which I have now gotten at least a name. I've been kind of living on the back burner because not a whole lot of stuff's happened where there's new names I can throw at you, Cajun. Not a whole
Okay.
lot of stuff where there's like last week where the first Orthodox Jewish player could make the NBA. There's been a whole lot of stuff. A lot of Anthony Edwards, Magic Johnson, Steph Curry, AJ Wilson, James Harden, a lot of stuff where their names we've already done. And I believe we've done this name before, but I'm trying to get it out. It's a lot of letters. So I think you've already got an idea of who it is. So
Okay.
I'm just going to try it by looking at the name and guessing how I'm going to mix this up, okay?
All right. How many names?
It's just one. It's just going to be the
Okay.
one that
All
I've
right.
got. So we're going to go T K
T.
T
K. Okay.
T K U M A E N O.
Wait. Before you finish it, is this Giannis Antetokounmpo?
It is the big Greek freak, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I believe I've done Giannis before, and his name is rather simple if you know how to spell it or you know the letters that contain it. But the reason why he was on the NBA, I'll say for you page, but in the NBA stratosphere, is because we don't know if he's playing for Greece this year at the FIBA World Cup.
I don't think he's not.
He, has I believe that he announced that he will not be playing in August because he has not been able to he's not physically on the plane to take the floor for Team Greece. So without Giannis Antetokounmpo not playing for Greece this year, that really dampens their chances at the tournament. They do have his two brothers, I believe. Is it, how do you pronounce it? I know it's Kostas Antetokounmpo, who is the younger
Costas.
brother.
Costas. Yeah. No, I think it's Alex.
Kostas Antetokounmpo, and then the one that plays for the Bucks. That's kind of a meme.
Oh, Thanasis.
Thanasis Antetokounmpo is also going. So two Antetokounmpos will be on the team. The third one will not be in Giannis. But without Giannis, I'm not sure if this Greece team can do really anything at the tournament.
They might make it out of the group stage, but not more than that.
I mean, they're in the group with New Zealand, Jordan, and the United States. So that also leaves them very little room for error, as the Americans were 5-0 in their exhibition play, including beating Spain and Germany.
Hmm.
So I guess we will see. So that makes you, from the document, 26 for 27, Cajun?
25 for 26. I already changed it.
Oh, 25 for 26, making you 96.1% on the Scrabble board.
And a running joke that we've had for the
For over a
entirety
year
of,
now, almost.
yeah, I'm not the Raptors.
You are not the Raptors. Not the Raptors. Not yet, at least. You're not the Raptors.
Even if I miss the next I'd have to mess up the next 24 Scrabble boards for that to be the case.
Well, let's see if I can make it a little harder as the weeks grow longer and the season nears closer. But with Giannis Antetokounmpo, that will be it here for us from Polar Opposites for
One more
Kajan.
thing. One more thing. August 23rd. August 23rd is a very big day. Happy 45th heavenly birthday, Kobe Bryant.
To the late Kobe Bryant, RIP to a legend of basketball. Good way to end it, Kajan. But for Kajan, Thiru, Thani Castellum, I'm Spencer Byers. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode number 9 of Polar Opposites. We'll see you next week, same time, same place, here on The Outrage.
Later.